I have decided that I will relinquish the office of Speaker on Sunday, 21st of June.
A moment of history, a time of crisis. Parliament forces out Mr. Speaker. After days of humiliating criticism, Michael Martin finally fell on his own sword. Tonight, the impact of his resignation is reverberating right around Westminster.
On this special edition of the Evening News. The damage to democracy. The Speaker may be gone, but the process of restoring faith in politics has only just begun. Brown's punishment panel, how Labour MPs who have broken the rules will be barred from standing for election. And in other news, the Chinese couple lured into crime who paid with their lives.
Good evening from a Parliament in crisis on a day of history. Tonight's Evening News is live here in Westminster, where for the first time in more than 300 years, a Speaker of the House of Commons has been forced to resign.
Forget everything you thought you knew about modern British politics. Tonight we are in uncharted waters. The process to clean up this place behind us here has begun.
In tonight's programme, we were going to be bringing you the moment Michael Martin resigned and indeed reaction to his dramatic announcement. And we'll hear from the journalist who broke the story.
We'll examine how this crisis brought to an end a remarkable political journey.
We'll investigate what the Speaker's resignation means for British democracy and who may replace him.
And of course, we'll have the expert analysis of our political editor, Tom Bradby. But first, there was barely a spare seat in the Commons as the Speaker finally bowed to pressure and quit. It took just 33 seconds, 72 words. Our senior political correspondent, Chris Shipp, on the Speaker's day of reckoning.
Not one MP here has witnessed a day like this before. Not for 300 years have members forced a Speaker out of his chair. So MPs filed into the chamber in silence. Michael Martin was about to announce he was granting some of them their wish. He would no longer represent them in this House.
Order, order. Since I came to this House 30 years ago, I've always felt that the House is at its best when it is united. In order that unity can be maintained, I have decided that I will relinquish the office of Speaker on Sunday, 21st of June. This will allow the House to proceed to elect a new Speaker on Monday, 22nd of June. That is all I have to say on this matter. Order.
72 words and 33 seconds. So short, those of us who'd filed into the press gallery barely took our seats before he'd finished.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will respect your wish that we proceed with our business today.
And so they did, but look to the left of the Speaker's chair. As they departed, many Labour MPs who concluded yesterday he was a dead man walking shook Mr Martin's hands and offered him words of support. Very few Tories did the same. Outside the building, MPs who had called for his head were trying to make sense of things. Now they actually had it. Yesterday, you said to the Speaker in the House your early retirement would help the reputation of this House. He's now gone.
Yes. I believe he's taken the honourable course, and I'm pleased that he has taken that action. I'm not suggesting for one moment that this resolves all our problems, far from it, but it's the beginning, I hope, of a recovery.
Just the Speaker going doesn't change the terrible anger out there, and we need to reflect on the kind of Speaker we want.
And those who didn't want changes, Mr Martin's friends who argued in vain he should have stayed, said simply,
he will be emotionally upset, he will be emotionally drained, but possibly he will also be relieved that a nightmare that's been going on for some time with his privacy invaded by the weekend press will come to an end.
The end for Mr Martin was the expenses scandal, despite which Gordon Brown and the other party leaders met the Speaker tonight as planned to talk reform.
I think it's a measure of his professionalism and diligence that today, after his announcement, he has chaired a meeting of all the parties to look at how we can reform the existing system of Members of Parliament's allowances.
What we need is not just a new Speaker, we need a new Parliament. We need people to have the chance in a general election to pass judgment on their politicians.
For the first time, party leaders of all political parties have agreed a detailed set of radical changes starting right now for the way in which MPs' expenses work.
On those interim measures we will hear more this evening. So was Michael Martin a scapegoat? Perhaps. But there will now be a by-election, the last thing Labour needs.
Order.
By mid-June, a new member will attempt to make order from the disorder of this House.
Order.
Chris Shipp, ITV News, Westminster.
Well, our political editor, Tom Bradby, is just out of that Gordon Brown press conference in Downing Street. Tom, what do you make of what he had to say?
Well, I think the point tonight, the Speaker going, is obviously an enormous moment, but for people out there, I suspect they want that to just be the beginning of really a revolutionary process that will deliver a way forward, but will also deliver some kind of justice and retribution, if you like. Now, Gordon Brown was sounding quite tough in there, some quite radical proposals coming forward from Number 10 today. But he spoke of sanction against MPs that turned out to defy the rules. Well, what does defying the rules mean? We all know that the rules were so incredibly loose that almost nothing appeared to defy the rules. Having said that, when I put specific cases to him, like Margaret Moran from Luton South, he used very strong language, said it was unacceptable, even referred to the conduct of one of his cabinet members, Hazel Blears, as being completely unacceptable. I mean, how she can stay in the cabinet tonight when her own Prime Minister has described her behaviour as completely unacceptable is a bit of a mystery. So I think, yes, Speaker Martin is the beginning of a process, but it's clear the public want much more. They're very angry. They want this to go further, and we've had the words from party leaders now. I think the real question is, do we get the action?
All right, Tom, for the moment, thank you.
Well, Michael Martin's resignation speech may have been brief, but those few spoken words made history as they echoed around a silent chamber. His handling of the expenses crisis, or mishandling of it, threatened to undermine the credibility of his role and with it the foundations of our democracy. Juliet Bremner now on the constitutional crisis gripping the corridors of power.
He often seems no more than a master of ceremonies, but the Speaker plays a critical role. He is the embodiment of Parliament's principles, ensuring democracy through free speech. He must maintain standards of behaviour. If his authority is questioned, so is the authority of the entire House.
Order. I'll take some points of order, but
he needs to be respected to allow him to act as a referee between 646 MPs.
Keeping order in the chamber is just part of his duty as chief officer or the highest authority here in the House. When he chairs a debate, the Speaker must ensure that every MP, however junior or unpopular, has the chance to voice their opinion. And he must be above party politics, in effect, the custodian of an independent Parliament.
Sir John Trevor was the last Speaker to be kicked out more than 300 years ago. Speaker Martin's decision to relinquish the Grand Office with all its trappings should be the signal for a general election and constitutional reform, historian David Starkey told ITV's Lunchtime News.
There's no point in replacing Martin with another lookalike, either Labour or more likely Tory. We'll simply have the same policies with a better accent and a little bit more intelligence. That won't do.
Lord Steele believes a snap general election would be a mistake, but ultimately more MPs must go.
If there was a sudden election tomorrow, they wouldn't have time to do it. But there is now time, and I believe that the right course would be for the members in the constituencies of every party to say, if you have behaved so badly that you've lost trust locally, then we should find another candidate.
There may be quibbles over the detail, but there is general agreement that the Speaker's departure will fundamentally change the way things are done at the Palace of Westminster. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
From his early life as a trades unionist, Michael Martin became one of the most important politicians in the UK. It was a career that spanned 30 years and a remarkable political journey. But despite a life of service, it is scandal that he may well now be remembered for. Paul Davies reports on the rise and the fall of Michael Martin.
Order! The Honourable Lady's very noisy today. Must be quiet.
A former sheet metal worker who left school at 15, Michael Martin described his election as Speaker of the House of Commons a victory for the working class. His roots couldn't have been more working class, from union official to Labour MP lending his support to the Scottish miners.
It's an easy thing to say, I'm a left-winger.
For 30 years he's represented Labour in Glasgow North East. Nicknamed Gorbals Mick, here Margaret Thatcher was his target.
Why doesn't she give up this irrational obsession to implement the poll tax?
As Speaker, he immediately did away with the traditional tights and wig that went with the job. On his very first day, he infuriated some MPs by talking to the press before addressing the Commons. Controversy would follow him. Notably when it was revealed that £4,000 had been claimed for taxes to take his wife Mary shopping. He was also widely denounced for allowing police into the Palace of Westminster to search Tory MP Damien Green's office last year. The beginning of the end came when he attempted to block the publication of MPs' expenses, but it was the prickly manner in which he dealt with MPs like Kate Howie on the expenses issue that finally made his position untenable.
I listen to the Honourable Lady often when I turn on the television at midnight and I hear her public utterances and her pearls of wisdom on Sky News, and it's easy to talk then.
The last few days have been anything but easy for Michael Martin, but such was the pressure there was no way he could go on. Today, finally, the 63-year-old who lists bagpipe playing as a favourite form of relaxation was playing his own lament. Paul Davies, ITV News.
Right, let's join Scottish television, STV's political editor Bernard Ponsonby, who's in Michael Martin's constituency in Glasgow this evening. And Bernard, you broke the story of the Speaker's resignation this morning. What do you think happened overnight to change his mind?
Not so much what happened overnight, Mark. Yesterday in the House of Commons was a terrible day for Michael Martin. It became absolutely apparent that he didn't enjoy the confidence of the House. He reflected on that last night and he decided to resign. This morning he spoke to Gordon Brown, he spoke to his election agent Jerry Leonard here in Glasgow North East, and he spoke with Lord Fowkes. I am told that his mood is really one which is quite philosophical. They have said that he simply accepts his fate, that he accepted that he could not go on if he didn't enjoy the confidence of the House. It now means a by-election here in Glasgow North East. Gordon Brown needs that like he needs a hole in the head. And of course, given the backdrop, perhaps an anti-sleaze candidate standing against all of the traditional parties.
All right, Bernard, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Well, still to come on tonight's evening news, make them pay. Labour's plan to deselect the MPs who've broken the rules.
And murdered by gangsters, the two Chinese students caught up in a criminal underworld.
We are back in less than a minute. Join us then.
This bank holiday time at Dreams, you can save and save again with double discount on a massive range of beds. There are thousands in stock for next day delivery, free credit on every bed, and with hundreds of pounds off thousands of beds, all you need to do is choose the bed of your dreams. So hurry, there's double discount plus extra savings this bank holiday time, only at Dreams.
Welcome back to Westminster this evening. The Speaker's dramatic resignation today not only marked a moment in history, it also, of course, has huge implications for the future. The immediate task is now to find someone suitable to replace him.
Yes, with British politics engulfed in its most damaging crisis in centuries, taking control and reforming the Commons will be no easy task. So are there any candidates? Our political correspondent Lucy Manning takes a closer look at who could be next.
Traditionally, the Speaker is dragged to the chair. Tradition counts for nothing here now. But after what's happened to Speaker Martin, will MPs be this reluctant to replace him?
Michael Martin has announced he will step down in a little over 4 weeks' time. The person who next sits in the Speaker's chair will be elected by a new system. The Speaker will be chosen in a secret ballot for the first time in history. The candidate will need between 12 to 15 nominations, and at least 3 have to be from a different party to their own. If a candidate receives more than half the vote, they're elected Speaker. But can a new Speaker re-establish faith in Parliament?
Anne Widdecombe's been tipped as an interim speaker.
I never heard it until about 5 minutes ago. The crucial thing is that we get the right person there. It isn't seemly at this point for people to start jockeying for position. The task is immense.
Some don't want it.
No, absolutely not. The one person I can guarantee you won't be the next speaker is me.
So who could be the next speaker? Sir Alan Hazelhurst, a Tory, was seen as next in line. He's a deputy speaker, but his own expense claims running into thousands of pounds could spoil his chances. Ming Campbell is well regarded on all sides of the Commons, but he too has been caught up in the expenses scandal. Sir George Young has long been tipped for the job, but his old Etonian background could go against him in the current climate. Sir Alan Beath was the first to throw his hat into the ring. The senior Lib Dem says he wants to lead reform. And there's Frank Field, the independent-minded Labour MP, who publicly attacked Gordon Brown over 10p tax. He's published all his own expenses online.
People will be massively disingenuous. There'll be all sorts of campaigns run. There'll be shadow campaigns. There'll be negative campaigns against certain candidates.
If MPs want to put some of their not-so-hard-earned expenses on the result, after today's events, who would bet against an outsider? Lucy Manning, ITV News, Westminster. Well, Michael Martin was not the only MP to quit today. The Conservative Douglas Hogg, whose expense claim for the upkeep of his moat was revealed last week, has announced that he will step down at the next election. The MP for Sleaford and North Hykeham said he entirely understood the public anger that's erupted over expenses.
And Labour's ruling council met today to thrash out how to punish MPs embroiled in the expenses scandal. It follows growing calls for those who have broken the rules to be deselected as parliamentary candidates. Our political correspondent Alex Forrest reports on the MPs in the dock.
The man in charge of investigating Labour MPs' expense claims caught up in the very scandal that's brought Westminster to its knees. The Daily Telegraph says Chief Whip Nick Brown, the Prime Minister's political enforcer, claimed more than £18,000 for food over 4 years, without a single receipt.
If the question, which you haven't really put to me, is about food, I think it probably is. That's what you're asking, what's called the subsistence allowance. You have to see that in the context of the life I lead.
2 Labour MPs, Elliot Morley and David Chater, have already been suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party after claiming thousands of pounds for mortgages they'd already paid off. But many have demanded leadership from the top.
Gordon Brown has been criticised for not acting quickly enough to deal with the fallout from the expenses scandal. So at a meeting here in Westminster of Labour's National Executive Committee, he promised tough action.
No candidate will stand for the Labour Party at the next election if they've defied the rules. No minister will be in the cabinet or in the government in future if it is proven that they have defied the rules.
It'll be up to a special panel of Labour's NEC members who will decide the fate of those MPs. Margaret Moran could be referred after claiming for dry rot treatment on a house 100 miles away from her Luton South constituency.
Get rid of Moran, this is from me, Tracy Charles, and put this lady in.
TV presenter Esther Rantzen is considering standing against Margaret Moran and was today out campaigning.
Obviously, it meant that she was spending an awful lot of time outside her constituency, and I actually think MPs have an obligation to the place that sent them to Parliament.
That's why the Prime Minister, with the support of Labour's ruling council, is prepared to take a stand against his own MPs, even if many think it's already too late. Alex Forrest, ITV News, Westminster.
Now on to some of tonight's other news now. An illegal immigrant has been jailed for life for murdering a young Chinese couple in Newcastle. Zhen Xingyang and his girlfriend Zhao Zi were killed after being lured into an illegal gambling syndicate.
Guang Hui Kao murdered the couple after first making contact with them by posing as a possible tenant. Stephen Douglas explains.
They'd come from China to study but became involved in an international betting scam. Zhou Xi was bound, gagged and died from suffocation. Her boyfriend Jun Jingyang was repeatedly hit in the head with a hammer. They were killed in the home they shared.
I was unable to stand, and the entire family could not believe it is real. And even now, I can't believe it is real.
The couple recruited people to commentate on football matches by phone. Bets would then be placed online in China to take advantage of a brief delay in transmission. In 3 years, £200,000 passed through their bank accounts.
It is a realistic possibility that their involvement and the money they made from those scams led the couple's killer to their door. Certainly the level of violence that they suffered is difficult to understand if all that was at stake was the laptop and mobile phones that were stolen from their house. In truth, the police say they may never know the reason why they were killed.
Guang Wei Sao has always maintained others were involved. He'll serve a minimum of 33 years in prison for the couple's murder. Stephen Douglas, ITV News, Newcastle.
New details of how the July the 7th ringleader escaped security checks have been revealed today. A report from the Intelligence and Security Committee found MI5 knew about Mohammed Sadiq Khan, but didn't have enough resources to follow through its investigation.
And the British economy has sunk deeper into deflation. The retail prices index fell to minus 1.2% in April, the lowest on record. So tonight, as the sun goes down here at Westminster, Britain stands at a crossroads.
As the clock moved towards 2:30, the opening of today's session, the reputation of Parliament lay in the hands of the Speaker.
Michael Martin, the ordinary man who made it to the heart of the establishment, was about to relinquish his position of authority and power.
He leaves behind a deeply damaged Parliament, still struggling to put its house in order, an institution so out of touch with voters that the future direction of politics in this country is itself uncertain.
And just a final thought now from Tom. Tom, not for hundreds of years has this place been in such a fix. What now?
Well, Mark, let me reduce it to a very pragmatic level. We spend ages telling our kids, don't argue with the referee. Down here, that principle is held by MPs with almost religious fervour. Why? Because Parliament takes such important decisions on peace and war that it's vital that the Speaker is above all of that. Today, they turned on him. Why? Because of the anger of people watching this programme, amongst others.
Tom, thank you very much indeed.
And that is tonight's evening news.
Join me later with Julie for more analysis of today's historic events, but from the evening news team, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.